Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Coach Timmy and today I'm going to be talking to you about the most common mistake I believe that is made in Fortnite today. If you go on to enjoy the video, make sure you let me know by hitting the like button and subscribing. And let's get into discussing why I think people's poor priorities are the thing that is constantly getting them killed. So I'm going to go through this like any other normal VOD review, in that we'll go over early game and then mid game and then late game. So to start off with early game, you got to think about the priorities that people set straight away. Most of the time people are looking to try and finish fights fast, which is actually the complete wrong kind of thought process you need going into an early game fight. What you really need to be thinking about is how you can be getting advantages and controlling advantages. I've talked about this before in my spawn fighting video, but essentially a lot of people are trying to think about killing these people quickly rather than making sure that they can continue the game in a way that's actually positive to the overall contribution to the tournament. So I'm talking about things like making sure you control decent shield spawns, making sure you control really good positions in the POI to make sure you can get good cracks on people, all those sorts of things that are quite simple when you think about it, when you really break it down, but stuff that people probably don't think about enough. Now, another thing that is involved in the early game is, of course, your rotation through first zone. Now, it's important to be thinking about your priority. Yes, we want to be thinking about finishing these fights quickly, but we also want to make sure we're not rushing it. So the balancing act between trying to finish the fight early so you can rotate and then also leaving yourself enough time to finish the fight safely, that's a big balancing act that a good player has to perform every game to game. Now, mid-game is one of those big ones that I think is probably really difficult for some of the lesser players to really grasp. And the thing that I'm mainly talking about here is Storm Surge. So I'm not necessarily talking about mid-game fights necessarily, but particularly when it comes to cash cups and stacked lobbies, it can be really difficult for the teams who aren't tier 1 to first set themselves up into good positions to get kill points or to get surge tags, and then also balance that, like I said, with the good positioning. So becoming more experienced and getting the reps behind you is generally how you become better at knowing what is important to prioritize over something else. So for example, Storm Surge is generally found through zones 1 and 2, but the best players focus their rotations for zone 1 and then look for tags in zone 2. So they set themselves up into a really good surge spot for zone 1, and then as everyone rotates into them for zone 2, they look for their tags then. So being able to prioritize, we don't need the surge now, and then going and putting themselves into a good position for the next zone is something that generally you see good players do. What you want to be doing if you're someone who isn't at that tier 1 is noting down what the top tier players do in certain situations that you don't. The stuff that they do that you can see there is a priority there for them. They want to make sure they get this specific thing done. So as example, rotating early for first zone, but then making sure that you try and emulate that, not just so that you get the same results, but you also want to kind of grasp why they do it. You want to understand why, and if you understand why, from there you can become a better player from a theoretical standpoint. Now, if we talk about mid-game fighting generally, the priorities that people have going into mid-game fights are usually pretty good. People understand how to fight at a high level across all ranges of skills, because fighting is not necessarily a macro idea. It's generally micro decisions being made in split seconds. Making sure that things are happening quickly is really important. You don't want to get third-partied, so you tend to see the priorities that people have in fights actually being dispersed down the ladders of tiers between player to player. What is more important is being able to position yourself to get away from fights and to not get third-partied. You tend to see people being able to disengage as a tier 1 skill, not necessarily as a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 skill, because those guys are the ones that end up fighting you in Storm. Generally, this is because they don't understand how to disengage, they don't understand the positioning and where to rotate to afterwards, potentially where to find refarm afterwards, so they feel they need to fully send this kill, ensure that they get that kill point. So it's really important that if you find yourself in a fight with these people, you understand how to back out of it. And again, that priority I think is really important. The priorities you need to set going into specific games, into specific lobbies, is to not fight at all sometimes, and to understand how to disengage out of that is really important. Now, setting yourself up for late game, again, comes down to certain priorities. Surge, how important is it versus tanking damage, versus using mats, versus using shield? All that sort of stuff is really, really important to balance. And again, it comes down to understanding where you are in the tournament and how to play a tournament. So we can come back to the idea of surge and all that, but I think planning your tournament beforehand gives you a really good start into prioritizing well. If you understand how to prioritize your entire tournament, you should be able to prioritize your games pretty decently off that. So, for example, if you're going into game 2 of a Cash Cup, you've just had a win, you should not be thinking about kills. You should be thinking about having a really solid game for game 2. So you've come off a 10 kill win game 1 in a solo Cash Cup. You don't want to be thinking, let's go get another 12 kills here. You want to take that thought fully out of your mind, and you want to be thinking, let's get a top 5. And from there, your early game, mid game, and late game priorities should be adjusted as per what you've just come up with as a goal. Now, of course, it's really difficult for those tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 players to stick to these sorts of mentalities, and that's generally why you see people having 2, 3 really good games and they're at the top of the leaderboard for an hour and a half, and then they fall off really, really quickly because they don't understand how to prioritize the right things going into different games of the tournament. Make sure you understand this before the tournament starts, not so you're really finding it difficult throughout the mid game and late game, unsure what to prioritize at the time. Coming into late game, it's fairly similar to what I was talking about with mid-game fighting. There's a lot of micro decisions to be made in split seconds, and in late game it's really hectic. You need to have this ability to make those snap decisions really, really quickly and make them good decisions. This is one of the reasons why Jinx and Worthy and Speedy and Muzz and then the best players overseas are as good as they are, because they make split-second decisions really, really consistently, really, really well. So I think it's really important to first note that. Sometimes there is some synapse stuff. People make better decisions quickly than you do. I know I'm terrible at making good decisions quickly if I'm playing, but if I'm sitting back and I'm analysing it from a coaching perspective, I don't have the stress of actually playing the game on me. I don't suffer as much. I don't find that such a struggle. So sometimes you need to remove yourself from the moment, think about it as clearly as possible, and then get into it. But late game, I feel like it's actually pretty basic to come up with the tier list of what's important and what's not. Basically, staying ahead, goal 1. That should be goal 1. It's not even a question these days. There's no movement in the current meta that we're playing, which makes it even more important. If you don't have movement to catch up quickly, you need to just be staying ahead as a first priority, making sure you're establishing your layer. And then, of course, there's other things like staying edge, making sure you're being mobile between layers. There's all sorts of things that are important to prioritize. But then, of course, there's the refresh. Now, the way that I think about it is it's almost like playing a game of chicken. You've got the idea of I need to stay ahead, but as your mats start to dwindle, you've got the idea of the refresh starting to come up in priorities as well. So again, it's a bit of a balancing act, really. You've got to make sure you understand when the need of the refresh is starting to overtake the need for staying ahead, because you can't stay ahead with no mats, and you also can't find yourself falling behind consistently if you don't need a refresh. So again, making sure you understand how to balance those things I think is really, really important, and that's why it's important, particularly if we're talking about trios again. Let's go back to trios. It's really important to have lots of communication between your team late game. How many mats does the lead tarper have, and at what point are the fraggers out back really starting to say, fuck, we need a refresh here, guys? Having that communication between the two teams within your team, I think is really important, making sure people understand when we're going to go for the refresh and when it's really important to full send, when we're going to be getting in, getting our refresh, getting out and getting back ahead, and making that the first priority again. Anyway, that's what I think the most common mistake is, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. To be honest, this is more of a waffle sort of video. I kind of wanted to just put one out, see what you guys thought. But I think what's important for you guys to remember is that prioritizing the right things at the right times will make you a better player. And the reason why the best players in the world are the best players in the world is because they know when to prioritize the right sorts of things at the right sorts of times. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments and I'll catch you later. Peace.